Gerry, it's great to sit down with you today.
Pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Well, yeah, and this discussion's been several months in the works, and we're going to talk about connected insurance at some point. But there's lots of other interesting stuff we could talk about before we turn the recorder on. We were talking about tornadoes in Ontario and soccer in Italy. There's so many different rabbit holes we could go down. So today I have Gerry de Lauro. So did I say it right, Gerry, or is it like...
that's pretty good. You're married to an Italian, so I would say you did pretty good there.
Okay, yeah. I want to say de Lauro, but that's probably rolling the R too much.
It's not bad. It's not bad. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, we try. And so you're president of the Ontario region for Hub International Ontario.
Personal insurance.
Personal insurance, right. And so we'll unpack kind of your role at Hub, where you're focused, et cetera. We'll talk, like I said, about connected insurance, but we always like to kind of start these conversations off just to kind of get to know the person a little bit and,
absolutely,
throw people off when they tune into an insurance podcast. They're expecting something boring, but we have really interesting people like you and people like me who disappear into the green screen because I wore a green golf shirt today, which could be a very manual and arduous process. So that's a good example of where tech is pushing probably an industry forward. Like being a Lean Six Sigma guy, I've got some of that in my background, and when I stand in lines, I see things in a completely different point of view, and I see a lot of waste from my travels at the airport and how things could be done more effectively and more efficiently. So I'd be really interested to see how efficient, how streamlined that process is, considering all the various things. Like we live in a post 9/11 world, and now we live in a post 9/11, post pandemic world, and so we already had a lot of additional steps that could be seen as waste after the whole 9/11 experience.
Yeah.
And then now we have this, right? So I'm wondering how much more technology has helped kind of push the envelope a little bit in that industry.
Yeah. I think it's helped a lot of things. I mean, I think about my boarding passes on my phone. I wish my Nexus card could be on my phone, but
me too. Yeah.
That's going to come at some point. But, I think about going to the dentist lately. It's like you get a text message, or you come into your appointment, you show up, and the last year and a bit, it's like they text you, come in, do what you need to do, and then off you go. And I think it's made our life a little bit easier. I feel more efficient. I don't know about you, but at the same time, there are some things that I do miss that I am excited about coming back, because sometimes things can be very scheduled, and that's less fun, or at least for me, it's gotten less fun for some things.
Yeah, I agree. And it's funny. A few people I've been trying to connect with lately have been saying to me, just call myself. And my first reaction is I was a little bit of surprise, because you're not used to just calling someone. You have to, go back and forth, do the dance, and then find a date that works for everyone, and then a Zoom call. But we've lost the art almost of this spontaneous conversation, right?
Yeah, and there's a great Burger King commercial. I'm not sure if you've seen it, and it's all these spoofs on COVID. And one of the spoofs is just, will people be able to actually engage with each other, because they've been doing it virtually? And what's it going to be like when you're in a room with somebody and you have to walk to them and talk to them? So, yeah, I mean, it's going to be an interesting sort of reintroduction back.
Yeah.
But there are some things that I believe hopefully will stick around as well that have improved.
Yeah, well, I think humans we're resilient, and we've been on this earth for thousands or millions of years, depending on which history books you're reading. And I think there was something, I didn't see the Burger King ad, but I read an article that talked about the snapback effect. Okay. And it basically talks about when you take humans out of their natural environment for a prolonged period of time, yes, new habits are built, et cetera, but when you throw them back into the previous environment, things snap back very quickly. And I think at least for extroverts like me, I have no problem striking up a conversation with strangers, right? So,
and for us, being in Florida was a bit of a social experiment, because we were used to wearing masks, we were used to limited capacity, and all bets are off there. Not in a negative way. It's just that's they're
at a different stage. Yeah.
Yeah. So it took us a little while to adjust to that, especially my kids. My kids, I
Sure.
would say, we are super high compliant, and they're like, no one's wearing a mask in the restaurant here. What's going on?
That's my bigger concern, on to be honest with you, as a parent, because you and I have already developed our communication, verbal and nonverbal skills. It's the generation before us, especially the younger ones, that I worry about, right? Where this could really, kind of have a detrimental effect on a critical point of their development. And I think as parents, we have to be aware of that, right? So
100%.
and be super cognizant. So speaking of of tech, you were away in Florida. Were you able to monitor your home remotely? Were you watching
Yeah,
on your phone?
1000%. I mean,
Yeah,
yeah, I think about all the things that are on my phone. So on my phone, I have a tab called Connected Home,
yeah,
and on there I can control my heat, my air conditioning, my garage,
right.
the lights, the timers, my alarm system. So yeah, absolutely. I actually had a friend. He was doing a bit of a reno job for us while we were away, and we would let him in and out of the house, and we would arm and disarm the house.
Yeah,
So we didn't have to give him a code. He just texted me and said, "Hey, can I go by tonight at 7?" And we'd be like, "Sure."
yeah,
And I have a Ring doorbell too, which I'm a big fan of. But yeah, it's so there's so much you can do away from home. Not just to keep your home safe, but actually to allow your home to still be used in a constructive way.
that's incredible. Yeah, and I agree. I was probably a late adopter, but I've got several connected devices myself. What's your count? Not that we're competing here, but how
Yeah,
many?
no, it's okay. I counted 12. So in my connected home tab on
Yeah.
my iPhone, I counted 12. I mean,
Wow.
but that's my TV. Like I can watch my TV anywhere, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, 12. I'm trying to think.
Yeah.
I can't think of anything I'm missing, but there
Yeah.
probably is a gadget out there that I don't have.
I would like to see like what the average connected devices per capita is like on a household basis. And I've read and heard this enough times that Canada is pretty advanced as far as being an adopter of IoT and stuff like that. So I'd be really interested to see what that stat looks like. That's
I
something
would say,
I'm going to write down as a
yeah.
takeaway because 12 seems high. 12 seems high to me. Yeah.
Does it? Okay.
Would you say that's not judgment. Would you say you were an early adopter though? Were you one of the
Yes, and I was an earlier adopter kind of by accident. So if I kind of segue a bit into insurance, I
Yeah.
had a claim at my house,
Okay.
and following that claim, I did some things with my insurance company to make my home more connected,
Hmm.
and I really just kind of went from there. So this for me started back in 2015, which sometimes feels like ages ago, but really wasn't.
Yeah.
But the number of applications that are coming out that allow you to connect. I mean, your garage door opener, you can do that.
Yeah.
Your lights. I'm a big fan of Nest. I like the interaction that I get with Nest. The leafs, the how many hours of energy I've used, that kind of thing. And I think for my kids, what's interesting is by the time they become homeowners, I hope this will all be second nature to them. I'm
Yeah.
learning. I think for them, they'll expect it. They'll expect to be able to do everything from their phone.
Yeah. Yeah. And you know what? I'm gonna plant a seed right now, and we'll come back to it. But with all the things you can monitor and measure through your Nest device, I wonder, as a consumer, with our consumer hats on, how much of that would you be comfortable sharing versus keeping private to yourself? So we'll come back to that. But I
We'll come
think
back to that one. Yeah, sure. That's
that's
a
a
great
good
question.
because I think that's one that comes up a lot, especially in the context of insurance. And
Yeah,
the industry has some work to do around building trust with consumers as well, right?
totally.
But before we jump into the fun stuff, let's talk about the really interesting stuff.
Sure.
So your origins. How did you get into insurance? Where
Yeah,
did you
great
start?
question. I
Yeah.
mean, a lot of people will say by accident, and for me, absolutely by accident. I had come through marketing as a sort of academically, and that was my passion. I wanted to work in an ad agency, and had one interview, never got the job, and I ended up starting in banking. I moved into telco, and then a friend of mine that I went to school with She was working for a big insurance company, and she was going on mat leave. And she called me and said, "Hey, would you ever be interested in working here?" And I said, "Where do you work?" And she told me, and I'm like, "Never heard of them." So I went, had the interview, thought I bombed the interview, but ended up, getting the job, which was initially going to be a 1-year contract, but ended up staying there, 6+ years. Enjoyed, every minute of it, and then 7 years ago made the switch over to Hub and have loved every day of it since. So kind of by accident, but I meet so many great, interesting people. And I wonder, we talk a lot about, talent and recruiting people into this space. We have to do a better job because there's so many great people out there and it's such a great industry.
Yeah.
So I came into it by accident, and I'm extremely grateful to be in this space.
And I think that it's an interesting stat because I think there's too many. There's in my connections and yours, I'm sure you've experienced the same thing. There's more people that didn't plan to get into insurance, at least our generation, and I think that's a great thing because the industry's full of great people, but I think we need to find a way to create better awareness of all the great things that the industry has to offer.
Absolutely.
And have less people fall into it by accident. Right?
Absolutely. Yeah. There's a lot of work. And I mean, the IBAO does a lot of great work. I do some work with Humber College. They have an insurance program and I sit on their advisory, and I'm really impressed by, the curriculum. I'm impressed by the academics, the whole bit. But yeah, we have to work hard and lobby. And I say lobby in the sense of just show, kids coming out of school why insurance is a great place to start a career and build a career. Working hard at it, but meet a lot of great people. So I hope, people listening to this, will help advance the cause because it's such a great industry.
Well, and you're with a great company, and so let's give a little shameless plug to Hub, and
sure.
Can you talk a little bit about your focus there at Hub in your current?
Yeah, for sure. So, like I said at the outset, I oversee our personal insurance practice, here in Ontario for Hub. I've been here, 7 years now. I mean, our mandate is pretty simple. It's really, to provide insurance solutions, to people, to insure their homes, to insure their cars, their lifestyle products. And as a large brokerage, we can insure your business, we can provide you with employee benefits, et cetera, et cetera. But I spend, probably 95% of my time helping the team figure out solutions. We deal with a lot of great insurers, so we have a lot of choice, which I think is really part of the hallmark of a brokerage, is having choice. We provide advocacy. Sometimes we have to get involved with claims, and that's because we work for the customer at the end of the day, and I really enjoy the work that we do. And our mandate is real simple: provide good insurance, to people, and help them understand at the end of the day, through education, through awareness, et cetera, et cetera.
There's nothing like having a broker in your corner, and I say that as someone who worked a lot of my career for a direct writer, and there's benefits to both, but I encourage anybody who hasn't experienced the other side to try it, and to measure for themselves. I know personally, as a business owner, and as someone who has a big family, I don't have time to be sitting down and shopping for insurance and trying to get the best rates and all the things that go into that. And I think people underestimate how important that insurance purchasing decision is, especially as you accumulate more stuff in your life.
Absolutely.
The value of a broker is worth its weight in gold. So, that's been my experience. I'm not just saying that because I'm talking to you. And that's actually a challenge to my direct writer friends out there.
Yeah, well, I think it's a challenge for us as an industry too, as a brokerage industry, is to continue to demonstrate that value. We have to work, hard every day to show the value that we bring. Generally people buy insurance because they have to, right? So TD Bank says you need a mortgage, you need to be insured. The government of Ontario says you want to drive, well, you need to be insured. So people don't buy it because they wake up saying I need to buy insurance.
Right.
I want to buy insurance, or they do it because they need to, because it's a requirement. So, our job is to make that experience as frictionless as possible, to give you as much advice and choice. And, we love talking to clients. At the end of the day, the most energy I get is when we've been able to help somebody either get out of a jam or insure something that's hard to insure. or just to help them understand the landscape, because it can be a bit complicated for sure.
100%. Yeah. Well, like even an aha moment for me was I live in an older home that was built in the 60s. We don't have forced air furnace. We have a boiler system. Sure. And I was talking to a call center underwriter or sales agent, and they didn't know what a boiler was. Wow. So I was like, they couldn't find it in their script, right? Their drop-down menu, it wasn't there, right? And that for me was just, I reached a point, at least as a consumer, where I was like, okay, I no longer fit into this box. Everything up until then, when I was living in a new construction home and everything was kind of cooking better, it was fine, right? And I hope I don't get too much flack from all my friends on the career side for making a comment like that. But I really, especially when you get into like outside of the norm with your insurance needs.
Yes.
That's where
I think you articulated the best. As you accumulate more stuff, as your life becomes more complicated, you really need an advisor, to walk you through that. Just like folks need a financial advisor, I highly recommend speak to a broker. And it's not just about, Interactive Call Hub. There are a lot of great brokerages out there that I have a ton of respect for and have been on your podcast. So thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. And thanks for that plug. And by the way, is the green shirt distracting you? It's distracting me.
It's okay. It's not bad. And I can shift a little bit too. So not to worry. It's okay.
See, so perfect segue into one of the discussion points. Why is connected insurance, from your point of view, important, and why should we as consumers be thinking about it, and why should the industry be taking this seriously? Let's start there. Yeah,
sure. I mean, if I start real macro, I think why it's important is because we have so many devices, plugged into the internet, and so many of the things that we rely on, work through the internet. And if I'm a consumer, I'm always thinking about, how do I protect my stuff? How do I protect my car, my family, my home? And a lot of those devices allow you to do that. And, it's still very early. Like from my perspective, I mean, the car has figured this out. I mean, when I got into insurance almost 15 years ago, UBI existed, telematics. It was very clunky, but it was, started off as a reform product for bad drivers. And it was like, you're a bad driver. We're going to put you in purgatory and we're going to monitor you. And now today it's evolved to, do you want to control or have a say in the price you pay for car insurance? Mm-hmm. And if you do, and you're willing to share your information, I don't like to use the word track, because to me, that's such a negative connotation. To me, it's about, sharing. And if you're willing to share, then you should be able to, have a say in the price that you pay. So I think it's important because it's just the way we live. We have devices. A lot of the things we do every day flow through the internet, and why not take advantage of that in a good way to make it sort of work for you. But not everyone's comfortable with sharing. Privacy is the biggest concern.
Yeah. And it does make me wonder, like, so I like the way you position that about, willing to share, and that that implies that there's a choice, right? And
there is.
Now that's
today there is.
There is today. It makes me wonder, though, if we fast forward 50 years, if that will just be mandatory. Because I think the industry, the more choice we have, or the more we can meet the consumer where they are. Because if I'm a consumer that says, I don't like the rate category that I'm in because of the factors that I have no control over, like my geography, my gender, my this or that, right? Then here, I'm going to share more about myself so that you can more fairly evaluate me. And I think that's a piece I hope that the industry, provides more choice and not less choice. I hope it's not like a either or. I'm a big both and kind of guy. Like, let's give the consumer.
It's a good question. I mean, it's hard to say what it's going to be in 50 years, but I can tell you over the last 15, it does feel like there are more options. People want more control over the majority of things that they buy. I mean, they do. They want to get it on their terms. They want to be able to pick and choose, but they also want simplicity. And sometimes those things I struggle with, like, do they actually compete with each other? Which is, I really want things to be simple, but at the same time, I really want to have control. And my life is complicated, just like your life is complicated. So those things don't always intersect and converge, quite easily.
Yeah. Well, and so it almost begs where that draws my thought process is, so if I'm willing to share and I say, I'm just going to open up my vehicle to you, or I'm going to open up my home to you, does that mean you as a carrier or broker can ask me less questions? Can you maybe make the onboarding process or the application process easier and more streamlined? If I just say, here, I'm going to flick a switch, I'm going to connect you. It's almost like opening a data room, right?
Yeah, and I think so.
You go in yourself and you do the assessment.
Yeah, because historically insurance has been about looking backwards, right? So what was my driving record for X number of years? How many claims have I had in the last X number of years? So if you treat insurance as something present and future, you could do it that way. I'd love to see an insurance company be courageous and say, John, we're going to insure you starting today. We're going to charge you, $50 a day. And depending on how you do today, tomorrow, that number could be 49, it could be 51. So it's almost like a lot of the other things that we do in life. But I'd love to see an insurance company not look at your past and basically try to give you a price, but to look at you and say, yeah, sure. We're going to start you here and it can go up or down.
Right. So on the auto piece, because that's really, I think that's the first place people go when they think about connected insurance. And I'm glad you gave that history lesson about, 15 years ago, it was a thing. This is to a lot of people you talk to, depending on who you talk to in the industry, you talk about things like telematics or the connected car. A lot of people think this is new technology. It's a little more advanced now, but I almost feel like, and I'd be curious to get your opinion on this. I almost feel like even though we're more advanced on the connected car, the industry's almost, at least in Canada, taken a few steps backwards. And I feel like for something that's been on the market for 15 years, we should be much further ahead on the innovation curve. What do you think about that?
I think part of it is, we are slow to adopt certain technologies. Auto insurance in Ontario specifically is heavily regulated, and those regulations are there to protect consumers. And as a broker, we advocate for consumers, and we are always thinking about the customer experience and being fair, et cetera, et cetera. So I think it's taking a lot more time than I thought, because I thought it was a great idea 15 years ago. And part of it was clunky, right? So you took a device, you plugged it into your port, then you'd have to take it out and you'd have to go on your computer and transmit that information. So I think part of that clunkiness wasn't attractive to people. And now that it's on your phone, it's way easier, because my phone is like my credit card, like it's attached to my hip. So I think the smartphone really has opened the door for anything connected. And my oldest, he is 15. The smartphone really came about 15 years ago. I remember working at Rogers, and it was about Blackberries and flip phones. And then one day the iPhone came out and the world changed. And it really hasn't looked the same since. So it maybe just needed that smartphone push to get it, sort of over that adoption threshold. But I think you're going to see more people, opt in for it because it's easy. It's not really difficult. Yeah. There's always going to be, I would say, a traditional, sort of counter offering, which is how insurance works today. But when I talk to people, I'm having more conversations with people about, you really should think about this. So if you think you're overpaying, or if you think your insurance company is sort of labeling you a certain way, well, you have the opportunity and ability really to show them differently. And I always say, if you can answer 3 questions, are you a safe driver? And I say, ask your spouse that question. So would your spouse or your kids agree with you?
Someone who's been a passenger. With you.
Absolutely. Do you mind sharing? And some people are nervous about sharing, but then I think about all the things people tweet and post about, and the third thing is, do you have a smartphone? And if you can answer yes to those 3 questions, you really should think about telematics. You can save money, but not just about saving the money. You actually learn something about yourself. I've tested 3 different products. I can see, am I speeding? Am I accelerating? Am I taking corners too much? Am I following too closely? We all know this, but it's interesting when your phone tells you and says, Gerry, like check marks, you did great, or like you really sucked today. When I think about my kids, I really want them to be insured this way because this is how they interact with the world. And I think if I can help them become good drivers by saying, hey, you scored a 50 or an 89, awesome. Or if you're at a 50, we need to work on stuff. Because when I was 16, I don't think I was ready to drive, even though I got a driver's license and, my dad put me on his policy. I don't think that was the wisest thing to do when I was 16.
No, I certainly wasn't for me. And actually, quick funny story. The first time my mother gave me the keys to her car, the first night there was an ice storm and I got into an accident. It was a small, low speed, under 5 kilometer bump someone in front while I was in a parking lot. But my mother always said to me, just because the Ministry of Transportation says you're ready and printed a card doesn't mean I'm ready to hand the keys over to my son, right? And it's a big responsibility. And I would agree with you, especially on that, because there's so many skills to develop as a new driver. And I think that can be a valuable aid where you're actually almost like a performance management tool where you're giving feedback, meaningful feedback that's fact-based.
It is.
And not like your parent who's
that's right. It's very objective,
Yes.
So it's not subjective. It's passive. You're in the car. Your phone is somewhere in the car. It even measures distractedness. So, a big concern for folks in the insurance industry is texting and driving.
Yes.
And, you've seen insurance companies, make these major convictions, which, will drive the price of your insurance. But it's really because there's enough data that says if you do this when you're driving, you'll eventually get into a really bad accident. So I like how the technology's evolved. I get the privacy 1000%, and I think we have to have confidence in the fact that the system isn't there to steal your information and sell it, but it's there really to use it. And they have to be clear. I think insurers have a massive responsibility to be very clear about how the information is going to be used. And if you leave an insurance company, they shouldn't have access to that information, and you should be able to maybe even take it with you. That doesn't exist today, but I think I think that'd be pretty neat if we could figure that out.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And, I can't help but kind of just ponder on the thought of, you talked about the iPhone and how long it's been around, 10, 15 years and mass adoption, and Android has caught up with that. And, everyone's got a smartphone now. I've got a few BlackBerries in my junk drawer at home, and they're like paperweights, right?
They were great though.
They were. I could text without looking at the screen. I kind of missed the physical keyboard a little bit, but I'm showing my age now, right?
Me too.
So, but I look at the insurance industry and I look at consumers and the Canadian consumer, the psychology of the Canadian consumer. I think Canadians are pretty obedient. We're
super high compliant.
We're very high compliant, and I would like to think that the consumer demand has been there for a long time, and I'm not supporting that with any stats. So this is all anecdotal, but this is two guys having a discussion at this point, right? But it does make me ponder a little bit on like why the industry hasn't delivered a solution sooner. And regulation is obviously a factor, and all those other things, but those are things as an industry we have control over, and I hope we can learn more. And this is part of the reason why we do this, from what the global community is doing and the other markets that are further ahead of us. And, because there's lots of use cases and proof points, like we just talked about, like young drivers, that make sense on the personal side. Commercial, I think it's an automatic.
Absolutely.
You're handing the keys over to someone that's driving thousands of miles a week, and, assets that are worth lots of money to companies that are expense lines on the P&L. Why wouldn't you monitor and try to influence driver behavior? It just makes sense to me. I think the industry definitely has some work to do, but I think all the pieces are there as far as the technology, the consumer demand, And my assessment personally is, and maybe I'm wrong, I think it's just now incumbent on the carriers to come forward with a product that's priced appropriately and available, not just on the personal side, but on the commercial side as well. And it comes down to choice and then educating the consumer.
Yeah. I mean, you asked me at the beginning, what's my mandate? Like, part of my mandate is to help advance this thinking, is to work with insurers and say, how do we figure this out? We, as a general comment, I would say insurance is not the most innovative, right? Yeah. Because a lot of it is about looking back and saying, how do we underwrite this? And ultimately, what are we going to charge for it? But it would be really neat if we could be a bit more courageous, innovative, adventurous, saying, let's make an assumption about a person, and then that assumption will be, tested through sharing of information, as opposed to, and you asked me before, I said, would that mean less questions? It really should.
Sure,
because if I said, yeah, you can, I'm willing to share my driving behavior, you really don't need to ask me what happened 5 years ago. You can see what happened 5 days ago, and you can see what's going to happen 5 days from now.
Reverse underwriting, right? It's instead of front end heavy, then it's more analysis heavy. And
if I was building an insurance company from scratch, I would think that way. I would say, how do we build this differently?
Right.
And it's easy for me to say, it's but having been in this space now for close to 15 years, I really see it, and I'd like to see more brokers. It's definitely high on our mandate. It's definitely something I think about and we talk about a lot. How do we provide just better solutions? And there are going to be some consumers that say, hey, I want to do it the old-fashioned way. No problem. It's there. But you know what? You have the ability to influence your insurance if you're willing to share. And some people will say, sign me up, and think about my Nest, for example, controls the temperature in my home. Is that something they need to do? Maybe. Like, it might provide them some indication of, do I run my air conditioner and heat my home correctly? But people would also be concerned, let's say, in the event of a claim. They might say, well, the insurance company might look for a technicality and say, well, I didn't heat my home, 24 degrees, I run it at 19, that kind of thing. It all starts with, being very clear about how the information is going to be used. I don't blame people. I mean, I would agree with you, which is my home is my sanctuary. It's my most valuable asset. It's the thing that I am most, concerned about being damaged. We were talking about, Gerry and the tornadoes, before we started the podcast. Like, that's a reality for a lot of people. But at the same time, if I can share enough about my home to make an insurer think, or at least get a view that I'm a good risk, up for it. It's not just about paying your bills and clearing the snow. It's about, making sure that if there's a water leak, that your water is turned off. Water. They say water is the new fire. I mean, I don't say that anymore because they've been saying it for so long. But yeah, absolutely. I mean, I can be away from my home for more than 3 days, and my insurance company should say, no problem. Gerry's got it under control, and if something is out of sorts, he'll fix that from his phone.
And you don't need a neighbor with a key to do that, right? Which requires rewriting a lot of home policies, right?
Would. Yeah. But again, if I was starting, it's interesting. I think there's an opportunity for a home builder and an insurance company to actually figure this out. So imagine you bought a new home and it came with all the devices, and those devices, provided information to the insurance company, something that you agree to, whatever it is. That would be really cool, because the builder would say, here's your house. You're getting this great insurance policy from XYZ company, and you have the ability really to manage your home through your phone. I always think about hackers, and what if the internet goes down and all that stuff. I mean,
that's the next big threat too, right? We have to think about that as well. Yeah.
So that is something that we do have to think about and hopefully mitigate for. But I would love to see a home builder give me the keys to a fully connected home. An insurance company say, hey, Jer, $50 a day, plus or minus, off you go. That'd be cool.
Well, and
still have a broker there. Still have a broker there that can talk you through, do I need more of this, less of that? What happens when my kids, et cetera, et cetera. So
Right, right. And so you talked about, on the prop tech, which is all part of insure tech, on the topic of like new homes, for example, and water being the new fire. And I did a segment a few interviews ago, it hasn't been aired yet, with a company that does, water suppression, shut off, et cetera,
Right.
detection. They're
Very
called
familiar with them. Yeah.
Eddy solutions, right? So, I've owned two new construction homes previously, and there's lots of fire mitigation and CO2 mitigation in the new construction homes. Now, I might be a little bit dated because the last time we did that, went down that path was '09. So I'm sure the technology is much more advanced now. But would you say that the home builders have caught up on the trend of water yet, and having that built in, is that even an option they talk about in the showroom?
Some, but not as many as I think should be.
Yeah.
So I think it's still a little bit of a work in progress.
Missed
I don't think
opportunity
it's like
potentially, yeah.
I don't think it's like pushing up a rock up a hill, but it's a little bit of work. I mean, anything that has costs, right? Affects the bottom line price, affects the bottom line. Those things do affect things, but I think there's an argument to be made, which is, give me the house with the water mitigation, and an insurance company would say, wow, like, your risk of having a water loss basically gets, almost close to zero.
Yeah.
Because you have this. So I had a claim, and I had a fire claim and a water claim. I won't get into how it happened, but at the end of it, I have probably 10 smoke detectors in my house because the bylaws changed. And I have a water mitigation system, and I never worry about water. Once you go through a water claim, you really think about water differently because it's very hypothetical. But the second you walk into your home and you see drywall basically like this, and everything is moldy, and you just never want to be around water in your house ever again. It, to me, felt like the most invasive thing that I had ever experienced. And I did this on my own, out of my own pocket. I put in a water mitigation system in every day. Don't think about it because it's there and it works.
I think that's next, really, because I think builders, and you talk about the economics, they could always offer it as an upgrade, because even when you look at, a lot of builders offer home monitoring, and they might have a deal with an aftermarket alarm company, but they'll have it wired and installed. I can have central vac and everything else. So
I hope so.
I think it's a natural progression for sure. And what you say about that feeling of invasiveness, it's not dissimilar when someone's home gets broken into, or someone that's close to you has a break-in. Immediately, that changes your attention to, well, I should be monitoring this now, right? So I think that is enough for consumers. I think that's priming consumers to a point where adoption is there. And again, it comes down to industry education to say to the consumer, look, you're already using these things. You're whether you realize it or not, you're releasing your data already to third parties. But you have a relationship with us. We're your insurance company. You pay us.
You're not getting any benefit. You're not getting that additional sort of, I'm going to say, risk discount, for lack of a better term. So I like to see more, insurers, brokers, consumers, whoever, just get a little more courageous about this and say, okay, how do we do this? It works, I would say, well with cars. If you talk to any insurer that offers UBI, they'll tell you, as a general comment, that the loss ratio is better for folks that have UBI versus non-UBI. Right. And it would be the same for a house. Like the theoretical, the hypothesis is there. If you are monitoring and sharing information, the chances of something going wrong should be less. Not impossible. Nothing is ever impossible. But, if you have a water mitigation device, there's a very small chance that your house would be completely flooded. You might have a disruption, but as soon as that disruption is detected, the water is turned off, you really, shorten it. And I know the person that you spoke with, she's lobbying with some insurers, and one insurer is taking a really, good, courageous sort of position on this. And I'm excited, hopefully, to see more get behind this. And that's not even the sharing part to the insurer. That's just strictly a mitigation. So imagine you take that one step further, and there's something maybe to be shared that would help you even save more money. You've made an investment, right, in this technology. Why not get something out of it? Or
Absolutely.
a little.
Absolutely. Well, and we've got a handful of carriers, not as much in the US, that have venture funds in Canada. And I think that's an opportunity to really accelerate it, and to take part in more of this. And this is a big thing that I see, outside of this podcast and the work that I do with a lot of startups is talking, getting in front of those innovation labs and those venture labs, that we see some activity in Canada, not as much as we should.
It's kind of funny you mentioned that. So it felt like every insurer had some kind of lab, 3 years ago.
Yeah.
And I think maybe Intech might have been the first, maybe 5 years ago.
Yeah, what do you do in a lab anyway, right?
Yeah.
Sounds
but the premise, was always like non-insurance people trying to solve insurance problems. And I think there's some value to that.
Mm-hmm.
I just haven't seen or heard too much with respect to these labs in the last, maybe because of COVID, maybe because of other reasons. But it would be great as we kind of come out of this that they, get back to trying to crack some of those big insurance questions.
I think it comes down to pressure. I hate to say it, but sometimes, and I talked in one of my last interviews about the innovation cycle. I don't think I made this up, but it just seems logical to me, where I think disruption has to start before innovation comes in, and then you evolve. And I don't think
the threat of disruption. Sometimes it's not even.
Yeah. And as humans, that often is all we need. A little bit of motivation, the heat to be turned up sometimes, and because otherwise we get complacent and we get comfortable. And why change if we don't have to? Right. So we once drove around in horse and buggies, and no one talks about that anymore, right? So can you imagine a world without vehicles now? So but something had to force that, right? And someone had to become uncomfortable for that change.
Exactly.
To take hold. Do you think there's any limits? What would you say if just on the topic of a connected home? What do you think is off limits?
I would say anything like cameras would be off limits. Those privacy, not just in terms of sharing data, right? So not what I write my temp, not, it's it's things like, what am I wearing? Where am I having my coffee? What time do I get up? I think those real personal, things that we wake up and don't think about, those would be. I think about people who rent properties, for example, like that have Airbnbs. They'll have cameras, out the garage, maybe out the back, but you could never rent a place and have a camera inside.
Yes.
It would never work. Even if you were sneaky about it, you would totally sink your business. I think an insurance company, if they tried to get that information, that would hurt. But I also know clients that have used camera footage in the event of a claim to say, this is what happened. Like they busted through my back door. There were, 3 blurs, and they were here for 15 minutes on this Saturday at this time. I think that's a good way. But I don't think you could ever take any kind of footage from a live environment and use them to evaluate somebody, in terms of their risk.
I'm with you. I think that makes a whole lot of sense. And there has to be boundaries in place. And I think those things have to be written in. I also start to think about, sometimes all you need is to monitor trends and patterns to understand the risk of something. And where I'm going with that is, I think some level of anonymization is probably a good idea as well, where it's like, okay, give me access to this, but I don't need the details. I just want to see the patterns, right?
I could see it at an aggregate. I could see it every number of days. I mean, you see that with UBI. A lot of the options are not that they monitor you or they acquire information for a certain period of time. But after that, your driving is going to be your driving. You're not all of a sudden going to get really good or really bad. After 5,000 kilometers, 3,000, 1,500, whatever that number is, they kind of have a pretty good impression of what kind of driver you are. And same thing with your home. They don't need, I don't think, to see every second of the day in terms of your consumption of electricity, water, I think there are definitely things they can do at an aggregate level for sure. And that should be hopefully even more reassuring to people but it might start the other way around first, right? Because you sometimes have to figure out you have to figure out like what's the raw data essentially that provides you with the trends or the summaries that you then can say, this is all I need. But yeah, be clear. That's my advice to insurers is be super clear, be super transparent. And it should be an okay journey.
Now, like on this trend, where we are on the trend curve, do you see a best-in-class example globally that would be a hint as to like where you think this trend is going?
I haven't, I've looked at a couple of companies in Europe that seem to be figuring this out. I can't say their names off the top because I'm not, my recollection isn't that good. But when I read and when I've done some research, it feels like it's kind of coming from that direction.
Yeah.
There aren't any in Canada that I would hold up and say, awesome. UBI, I'd say probably Intact is the best at UBI, but no one has figured out the connected home. I don't see it. I would love to see it. And there are some examples in Europe and hopefully, the big companies in this country or even the small ones that are sometimes more agile than the big ones are looking at this and saying, what a cool proposition this would be if we could bring this to people in this country.
So, hey, if there's anyone sitting on the sidelines out there thinking about Canada as a market, I think it's right for...
It's a great way to get into the market. Like I said, if I was starting an insurance company, I'd really look at like really doing it from a connected perspective.
Yeah.
Be completely paperless, be connected and work with brokers, of course.
Well, maybe this is I was going to say, maybe this is a place like a challenge for like an MGA to take on first. Right?
Could be.
Like sometimes and that's one of the things that, I don't want to sound like I'm beating up on carriers all the time.
No.
It is that we can't always wait for the carrier to be the first mover.
Agreed.
And so sometimes like a technology, and the nature of insurers is very much like, show me. Okay, you are making some sort of a claim. Show me, because by nature, I'm a carrier. I'm risk averse, and I'm going to be skeptical. I'm going to ask lots of questions because I need to measure it to understand it and all this stuff. And otherwise, I'm going to treat it as anecdotal. So that that is a bit of a test, I think. To like, if you're a technology provider, or if you're a broker that believes in the technology, or maybe an MGA, then maybe you have to take the first move. Don't sit on the sidelines and wait for the carrier to come out with all the innovative solutions.
It's a good provocation. It's a good provocation. Absolutely.
Yeah. So and partner with brokers. 100%. I would like to see, because we have a lot of Canada's kind of a mix of Canadian carriers, European carriers, and US carriers that are all kind of dancing in this market. And we're really unique that way. And I would like to see, the patriot in me would like to see a Canadian carrier, Canada-based company really lead on this and come out with a solution for Canadians. But you know what? Maybe that's what we need. Maybe we need a new entrant. Maybe we need something new to come into the market. And Europe does seem to be further ahead, just in a lot of regards on that side of things. The U.S., we've seen different distribution models on the property side, but I'm not sure that they've even cracked the nut.
I haven't seen it. Like I've seen kind of things that suggest, might be coming, but I can't say that I'm aware of, any insurer that would say, the premise of our insurance is being connected. I think that would be an awesome thing. And I like your provocation, for a Canadian company, Canadian MGA, Canadian broker, maybe that combination, to put our heads together and say, what a cool value proposition that would be.
Right. Do you, so as far as Hub being Hub International, right? We're talking about, where you sit, Hub Canada, but you're part of an international group. Does Hub have, I would say they give them an advantage because you have a view into what other markets are doing. And that's one of the things that makes you guys unique. It's probably part of your value prop. Does Hub have a stance on this at all?
I mean, our general stance is about making insurance easier, better, for consumers. And using that sort of mandate to work with insurers, to advance that. So we've been able to do that in many respects across personal, across commercial, and starting to do that, more and more in employee benefits. And we have a couple of folks that, not quite a lab, but they spend a lot of time looking at different options and saying, what else can we do? I mean, as any good broker, you take sort of what's in the market, but you also see the whole market and see the gaps, and then work with other companies or different entities to try to solve for those gaps. I think this is a big gap. It's something I talk to a lot of insurers about, and I just wish they were a little more excited about it. And I think part of it's complacency. I think part of it is just getting some new thinking, into this space. And maybe it's going to come outside of insurance. Maybe it's going to come from, the Nest people, or it's going to come from the Ring people. I'm not sure.
Well, look what Tesla's doing on the auto side, right? Tesla's saying, "Hey, we're going to be the Apple of the car world, and we're going to insure it, we're going to manufacture it, we're going to warranty it, and we're going to cradle to grave. Everything's going to be with us. You're in our ecosystem, and we're going to do it better than anybody else." Jury's still out on whether or not they're going to accomplish that, but they're not an insurance company traditionally. That's not what they set up to be, initially at least. They're a car company, or at least that's how we think about them, because that's how we're conditioned to think about auto manufacturers. So maybe, like you said, like a Nest or some other technology provider that's already in there will disrupt the insurance space.
But I'd like to see a Nest kind of approach an insurance company and say, we have all these, clients that use our product, and that product is valuable to you because it would help you better understand, how they heat their homes, how they air condition their homes. So there's got to be some kind of convergence there, some kind of meeting in the minds where it's like, this is valuable, and stop underwriting based on, the things that we've done for 100 years. And let's look a little more sort of present and future. I'd love to see it. I'm, quietly kind of, talking to insurers all the time. I'm a big fan of UBI, as you can imagine. And I'm trying to get some insurers to think about the connected home. It's hard, but that's okay. That's one of the things that gets me up every day is like, how do we keep advancing this thinking? And we got some great people at Hub that are doing this, but I like to do this as well. And, I feel very fortunate that I am, I have good relationships with all the big companies. It's not that I like one more than the other. I think we are all there, to serve the client and to protect Canadians at the end of the day. So.
Yeah. And, it's like sometimes one carrier is a better solution for a different type of client, right? So it's good to have that choice.
Absolutely.
And, that's part of the advantage of dealing with the broker is you have a holistic view of what's happening in the entire industry. You're not limited to just one set of products or rules.
Exactly.
I would say, as a call to action to brokers out there who are listening, is don't be afraid to present new solutions that you see in the market to carriers. And sometimes that's that groundswell, and it can be like a grassroots movement, is what is going to push the innovation to the next level. Because maybe it is something they've looked at in their lab and the experience is limited, or they don't feel there's a strong consumer demand for it. And I think the broker's job, and a big part of their job, is to represent the consumer. They are the voice of the client in a lot of ways. So the brokers out there listening, don't be shy. Don't be afraid to try things with your clients and then bring it to the carriers.
And I know you do that, John. So you don't just say it. You're doing that on a day-to-day basis. So
yeah, well, and I will admit, I underestimated the influence of brokers earlier in my career, and brokers are a powerful force. And they still are in this country. So don't underestimate that. Gerry, last question, just in closing thoughts.
Yeah, sure.
What do you think is the biggest challenge ahead of us on this whole connected journey?
I think it's getting through the sharing and the privacy piece, and and just it's not about convincing people. I think it's just about being transparent about how I'm going to use this information. So, it's two things. I think you have to get people to buy into the concept and to understand, and you need an insurer to be courageous enough to say, I'm gonna take a different view to underwriting, and it's not going to be about what you did the last 10 years. It's going to be what are you doing today on a go forward basis? So yeah, I think it's trying to change that paradigm. It's trying to get people to think differently in this space. And, what I love about being a broker and being in this space is we are good, smart people, but we're also sometimes not super courageous. We can be conservative, that, and it's trying to sort of expand the thinking here.
You know what? I just wrote down and underlined courage. Insurers need, and courage might be now part of the innovation cycle, right? And I think
like that.
That's one of those things. It could be disruption, or it could just be courage, right? And it does require a first step. So thanks again, Gerry, for sitting down with me.
You're welcome.
Today and
my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
I know we'll have more conversations around other cool stuff, and
would love to.
I have an old Scotland jersey that doesn't fit me anymore.
Okay.
But
they didn't do too well in the Euro, though.
No, and they don't seem to really go too far. But that's in my heritage, so I always like to cheer for them. And maybe in our next conversation, Scotland will have. I think World Cup's next, isn't it? I'm not a big soccer guy, but yeah. So,
no, it is.
Yeah. So is that in the next year or 2 years?
It's supposed to be in 2022.
2022?
Yeah, the next year.
Perfect. Okay, so we'll make that like a marker if we haven't had a follow-up conversation, interview.
We'll wear our jerseys next time. So.
Yeah, and I won't disappear into the background. So fantastic. Thanks again for making the time on a Wednesday.
Appreciate it.
Really appreciate it.
All the best.
Awesome.
Ciao.